Welcome. And I also want to invite to join us, and I'm sure that he's very familiar to all of you, Mr. Obi Asika is the founder of IBA Ajie and Cabal Entertainment. Mr. Asika, you're welcome on stage. And finally, very happy to have someone joining from my small country, which is Portugal. Mr. Nuno Nobre is an expert on food culture experiences and also a professor of gastronomy tourism in Universidade Lusófona of Lisbon. So as you can see, we have a little bit of everything in this panel. We're going to be talking from art, culture, food, entertainment, screen, so you can imagine how it's going to be. But before we do that, I know that we just had lunch, but we're talking about restaurants before. Some think about ants, so I want to invite you to see this video that UNWTO has prepared.
food, the cuisine, the drinks, the nightlife in the case of South Africa, the historical figures, the events, the physical landmarks and locations. So we realized that the content on the service actually plays a great role, not only in connecting people to stories, but also in promoting indigenous cultures to the world. And this is why we think there's a great opportunity for collaboration. So screen tourism, it's a thing.
Thank you very much. I think, as you say, it's really giving it the stage, and in this case, the global stage, because often those small producers do not reach such an opportunity if it's not through such a global platform. As we're talking about entertainment, I'll go to Mr. Asika, and ask you, you've done very big events, and events obviously project the image of a country. How do you link events, also small businesses, and tourism?
Hello? Okay. Yeah, thanks for the question. I think the fundamental thing is that the creative industries in Nigeria are already our best foot forward. Yeah? That's what I believe. I believe that when you engage Nigeria, if you engage the creative people, you now have a situation where you can change a lot of things, because the disruption is coming from them. And as you talked about the value system, of course, when you have concerts and festivals, there's always, everybody sees the front end, but behind, there's a lot of work going on in terms of, like knowledge, skills. There's a lot of work. I think a lot of people, for some reason, think that the creative industries are just fun, but I think it's very, very hard. And to become a leader in the space, you really have to really step up, And I think one of the things that we're seeing now is that we have a situation where at least it's no longer a new thing, right? The conversation about Africa, I call it African soft power. The conversation around that, and the conversation around the tactics that we can apply to tell our story, just like Shola was saying, because I think when you really look at it, the biggest thing that we have going for us is our IP.
Very good. Well, I think talking about IP, going to Mr. Moody, obviously, and we've discussed it at very detailed yesterday in the workshop. There's a lot happening, a lot being created in the different areas and in tourism as well. But often people are not aware that that needs to be protected from a legal point of view, that protecting it from a legal point of view adds value, it creates brand equity. I know WIPO, obviously, main mission is that, but how do you see it in this space of, obviously, creative industries, but tourism as well?
Thank you so much. I think it's, excuse me, I think it's, from our side, intellectual property, it's important for the creative industry. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's very important for the creative industry. When you think about a creator, and I think Mr. Asika was just trying to explain that, it's not always just fun in that sense. It's a lot of hard work. And at the end of it, when you're creating content, you want to be assured that you have rights over what you're creating. One of the hardest or discouraging things is for someone to invest so much time, so much resources, and at the end of a venture, realize that somebody else is profiting from it to your exclusion. And that's because intellectual property hasn't been seen as part of that picture of content creation. And so what we need to be thinking about, I think, is to be able to say, how do we strengthen the knowledge of intellectual property, that people realize that they can get value, they can own these things that they have. And I think it's not something that just the creatives are involved in. It's something that the government has a strong role to play, because there needs to be a regulatory framework that assures people, whether it's investors, whether it's innovators, it's creators, content creators, it assures them that their investment is going to generate something for them. And I think that's where the intellectual property dialogue comes in. So I agree completely with that.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. And I always think how hard it is to navigate for most of the small companies as well, that world, because they don't have the knowledge, they don't know who to go to. So especially in tourism, there's a big opportunity to raise awareness, but also create easy hubs for small companies to actually access and go and say, okay, I'm doing this, how do I protect what I've just created? Or even countries, or we often talk about a country brand or a route. If we talk about gastronomy, it can also be protected.
Just to say that it's not just, like you're rightly saying, intellectual property nosedives so many aspects. We often talk about patents, for example, like a patent will protect an innovator who comes up with a new invention. And that it's been exported. I mean, we heard so much at the time of Paystack that was acquired. And you think of how much they were able to generate from that sale. It's because there was some IP that was protected, and that another person could say, look, we're going to put $200 million to buy and acquire that IP. Right? Now, you think about content creation. Right now, research tells us that about intangible assets constitute about $74 trillion. Now that's the value of intangible assets globally. It means that if you think about the top 500 companies, 90% of their value comes from intangible assets. It's not the physical assets that we see. And so we need to be thinking about that in the tourism space. How do you build a brand? How do you build authenticity that people want to pay for and want to connect to? And that, again, is something that intellectual property is very important for. Yeah.
Thank you. Talking about adding value, and we've heard about gastronomy in the previous panel, but I want to ask Nuno as well, because we're the same question. How do we stimulate creative industries, and in this case, gastronomy, to actually add value to tourism and to the communities where the experience takes place?
Yes, hello everybody. For my side, food culture experiences is about to create a memory on the tourists. And it's connecting the identity and the origins and with the people, with the culture of each destination, and place this DNA, food culture, in the service of the tourists. This is not easy, of course. There is a big work, preparation work to content creators, to collect the data from the local producers, the communities, the fishermen, the agriculture players, putting all together and prepare a package experience, how to make pleasure with food and culture. So it's very challenging. So, in my opinion, of course, it's very important. The technology, it's very, very important. So we act before we promote. We create contents to share on Netflix, to share on the flyers, to create books, to make portals, to place this kind of food culture, unique experiences that the destinations should state and should promote their identity and origins. No matter if we are, for the identity and origins, we are not talking about politics yet, okay? So it's like a DNA. So I'm from Portugal, I'm very proud of my origins, I'm very proud of my country, of my people, of fishermen. I have friends everywhere, no matter it's a fisherman, it's a chef, it's a tourism agent. So it's very important to start with the identity and the food culture, and then create experiences that should be authentic and should reflect the destination value, how we add value to the food and culture through the authentic experiences.
Thank you, Nuno. I think that's a very interesting point. I'd like very much the word content creation, because generally we talk about building experience in tourism product, but it's really, from a creative point of view, we're creating content for people to experience the storytelling, and sometimes things that even the community has so much forgotten that that process helps to bring it up and value it, no? We've seen some of the examples of your projects with fish that people would not eat before because they were not aware of it, but if it's put in a new context, they value it, and you create a new experience and new benefits for everyone.
Just say this, Netflix is screen tourism, and sometimes food culture experience is nostalgic tourism, because we are getting things with the people that sometimes people don't eat some food for 20 or 30 years ago, or they don't eat that kind of recipe since they had the grandmother alive. So it's like nostalgic tourism that is very important. And most of my projects of food culture experience, festivals and so on, always have this, because people are really interested in know and taste and know the story about what people eat before us on our times, and it's very interesting and potential to attract tourism by the nostalgic tourism. That is very important.
Thank you, Nuno. We're talking about identity, and I'll go to Professor Ododo, because obviously we're here in the house of identity. How do you see this link? How can we improve or enhance the connection between the creative industries, which, as we said, here in Nigeria and in Africa are already leading, to actually, in this case, use it as attraction for tourism?
Yes, thank you very much. Creative industry feeds tourism. We are very lucky in Nigeria that we have visionary leaders. From the word go, when this edifice was created, it described as home of tourism. In here, so much happened. It's a beehive of activities, creative activities. So that way there's a synergy. A tourist coming to Nigeria, for instance, knows that visiting the National Theatre, there's so much to see, so much to buy in terms of souvenirs, because we have craft shops and carvers, producers. Even within the edifice itself, historical elements, products are stored in here. I dare say today in Nigeria, this is one of the best institutions that houses key creative products in Nigeria. Now, conscious efforts have to be made to ensure that the performing arts, the visual arts are coordinated to run side by side with tourism endeavors. Tourism won't go far if you're going to travel to a destination, sleep, wake up, and go back. There must be activities that should come with it to make it memorable, interesting, and for you to have stories to tell when you return back to your base. And you have these activities very much available in the performing arts, in the visual arts, wholesale creative activities. We know that sometimes it's difficult to know what creative activities is going to happen on arrival, but this is the point where there should be synergy between tourism and the creative industries, so that there can be information available to key creative activities that will take place periodically so that tourists can plan their travel and visitation within such period. You know, when you're in Nigeria, in Calabar, there will be Carnival Calabar. So you can plan to be part of it. You know that there will be Osun Festival in Osun State, also plan to be part of it. All these are avalanche of creativity that is all over the place. And I tell you, tourism will thrive better, get this synergy with the creative industries. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a very important point because often a lot is happening in the country, but it's not communicated to the outside. And even probably inside, it's sometimes hard to find a place where you can say, I want to know what's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 months so I can actually buy tickets or plan my trip, as you say. And this brings me, Mr. Asika, to exactly that point. How can Nigeria, in this case, use this soft power to work towards attracting more people? Is it communicating more? Is it having a better planning? What does it need to bring that outside?
Right. I think it's just about focus, right? When we decide to focus on ourselves, I think we will do better, right? Everybody worldwide, it's clear that the Nigerians have a unique, I don't know how to frame it, but we have a unique talent, a unique brand, right? That once you've engaged a Nigerian, you know that these are the Nigerians, right? And I think as that happens, and because of all the other elements that are happening, because when you're talking about touring, I mean, globally, we need to be able to build touring in Nigeria. We need to be able to build opportunity for the people who are the live event producers, who are the people that actually execute the events. Because of course, people just see the star, but when you see a star on stage, there might be 100 people involved in making him look a particular way. So it's that work, that communication, and I think you're right. It's also about communication, right? I loved what the Vice President said earlier, that, you know, it's great when somebody in that position is shouting out this movement, because it's a movement, right? And it's not something that, I think, you know, without any disrespect to government, I think it was done without government. And now, what we want to see now is how can the government get involved in the back end to help guys with like the talents, right, to actually engage. Because I think what you'll find is that there's incredible talent here. There are people who are creating all sorts of things every day, but we haven't actually created the platforms yet, domestic platforms, to promote these things that are happening. So it's like, that is something that we all need to be thinking about, because our stuff is already global, right? But Nigeria, as a market, is kind of unexplored. You know, I feel there's so much more that can happen, and that's where the real, how would I put it? That's where the real opportunity lies, yeah? The people who are behind the scenes, who are not necessarily the ones that you see in front of the events. These are the key people that are actually making things happen, and we need to support them and build them, right? Because right now, Nigerians love what's happening, but we need some support for the sort of the process, the back end, because the talent is here. We have incredible lawyers, and I think he was saying about IP. When you get the IP issues resolved, and I'm sure Shola will say from Netflix perspective, this is such a huge opportunity, because in reality, Nigeria is still not really told its story, and I think there are millions of stories that we have that we need to bring to the fore, right? And when we do that, I think it will help all of us enormously.
Thank you. No, I think that's a very important point. And as you were speaking about the back end, and I was thinking about the discussion earlier on education, and it's a lot of training in so many other areas that we often don't think about. Events management, the technical components, everything. And that is a huge opportunity also to do training in other areas that we generally in tourism would not think, because we would think hospitality, we would think hotel management. But to have that broader perspective, I would say today we need really to look at 360 tourism and see how we can build experiences and create skills. Shola, just talking about this, what would be your advice to tourism destinations to better use, in this case, screen tourism?
That's a great question, and I think Prof. Ododo said something that's super important. There has to be an intentionality about what tourism agencies do. And I will use the case of Netflix because, of course, that's what I'm more familiar with. When Netflix produces an original, we all know what the Netflix originals in a certain locality, 67% of the budget we invest does not stay within the screen sector. It goes to everything from construction to electricity to hairdressing and design to transport to retail. And all of these are like small businesses that we're here to talk about, right? So the point Obi makes as well about there being a lot that goes on behind the scenes to support the end products that you see on your screen. It's an area that governments should take very seriously. So not only is the content you see on screen, that you see on Netflix, creating jobs, and most of these are like creative sector jobs, right, and culture sector jobs, but it's also playing this key role in cultural promotion and cohesion that serves to tell the human story. And for as long as people are able to see themselves and their lives reflected on screen, it engenders even more desire for storytelling in ways that are not only enabling people to get their story out there to the world. And we, as Netflix, we believe that having this global stage that spans 190 different countries means that there's a bigger market for local creators, for instance, to target. But beyond telling their story to the world, it also provides an avenue for people to maximize their IP and get the financial returns that sustains their livelihoods, that sustains their families, sustains their business, and keeps on giving. There's a, what's that word now? Multiplier effect that happens by taking this sector seriously and investing in it. So that intention has to be there. If there's one thing COVID did showcase that the creative industry has as much potential as what we call the real sectors and oil and gas and all of that to contribute meaningfully to the policy objectives that governments are trying to achieve. It creates jobs, countless jobs, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And beyond that, it helps to promote the aspects of a country's story that people don't ordinarily see. So storytelling might seem like a fun thing it is fun, but the hard work that goes into it serves purposes not just for the storytellers, but for the objectives that governments are trying to achieve. So we believe that there is an opportunity right now for tourism agencies to look at how can we leverage the love for content on global streaming services, for instance, and use that to translate that love into actual physical tourism traffic. If I go back to Anikulapo, I love that story so much. I'm a Nigerian. Anikulapo was entirely produced in a place called Oyo, not in Lagos. Is there an opportunity there to get people moving physically to go visit Oyo as tourists and find out why this great story was staged here? We have done collaborations with countries like Spain, other parts of Europe, countries like Kenya, South Africa to an extent, Indonesia, Korea. And all of these collaborations are to move the love for content on the Netflix service into physical tourist visits to those locations. And it's succeeding. If I finally talk about the particular example in Europe, what we did was we worked with the tourism agencies across 3 or 4 European countries to find out or rather, we knew what people love the most about our shows, and we worked with the tourism agencies to make it possible for people to actually visit those sets, which also happen to coincide with some of the best localities that those agencies want to showcase. And so there's a real financial, social, and economic opportunity, and we think the time is really ripe to harness it.
Thank you. So I think, well, we had this discussion yesterday in our workshop, which is, it's very nice to see your location on screen, but what do you do with it afterwards, no? And we've seen with Lord of the Rings, we've seen it with Da Vinci's Code in Paris and in Rome, but there's, now the content is so wide that there was, by then, we all had to go to the theater and watch a movie. Now we can just choose according to our community interests, which I think it's something very important for destinations as well to understand. People move by interests more and more independently of where you live. And I think Netflix is a great example of the different interests across countries, which can be very similar. Either you're in Asia or in Africa or in Europe, and those communities of interest share the same. So it's really discovering and taking your creative, your tourism to them. Coming back to gastronomy, Nuno, what advice would you give, we're talking about tourism destinations, what advice would you give to the destination managers on that link between the creative industries, in this case gastronomy and tourism? What can they do?
Let me just comment and mix a bit entertainment and gastronomy, because sometimes it's related and it's dangerous sometimes. But I want to give you an example of a project that I produced this year. It's Rock in Rio. It's a music festival that is in Brazil and in Portugal with 80,000 people per day. So, and this year was the first year that we built a food court, a 3,000-meter food court. We invited the chefs, the rock stars that they are, but also we invite other rock stars, the producers. So we had a stage with a food court point of sales. They developed menus with local products from different ecosystems in Portugal. So the principal ecosystems, the local products. And then we have a stage where they made show cooking with the producers of that product. And you can imagine a music festival. Normally we have fast food or foods that are for festivals. So it was really funny because we had the backstage of the gastronomy because I work with chefs. I'm also a cook. I run a restaurant also, for you to know. I work with several chefs. But they are not the only rock stars in this area. So we have to bring the producers to the back office people, the food culture back office to the stage. And all of my events, in festivals, I invite chefs to show cook and showcase their food, their concept, whatever. There is all of them goes 1 or 2 days before or 1 week before to meet the people, to meet the culture of the place where we are doing the event. So it's very important to reduce the gap between the rock stars, no matter it is entertainment or gastronomy or education or whatever, because, for example, in education, I'm a professor, I'm a rock star also, but I learned a lot with the grandmothers in the remote villages. They are also rock stars. So we are all rock stars that we should include on the value chain of the gastronomy, entertainment, culture, and so on. Advices, again, the relation, the food is the relation with the biodiversity. So my advice is to create experiences, unique experiences, where you put all together and reduce, of course, this kind of rock starability levels or something, and gather them together to enlarge the final experience and unique and singular to the tourists. It's very important that they feel that they are. It's like in Portugal, you know, people love to know the story about others. In Portugal, we normally say we go to the hairdresser and people is knowing stories by the person that they have at their side, or the social media people or VIP people. So, and this is a good advice. People like to know stories about the others. And in food culture and in gastronomy, I love to know the stories of the fishermen. I go to marriages of the fishermen, daughters of some fishermen. I go to their houses. I live as one of them. It's very important to connect the tourists with the stories and with the daily life of these food culture agents and people. And this is one advice I can give others, but I don't have time.
Thank you, Nuno. And I think the example was really good, because I don't think, actually, I saw it all over the newspapers in Portugal. And I think it's the first time that I see traditional cuisine being brought as such to such a huge music festival like Rock in Rio, which is, to our parameters, a really significant event. And I think it created also media attention, which is also important to bring that into the attention of, oh, we actually can build these two worlds together. You just don't, if you're in a festival, you don't need to have fries.
It was amazing, because imagine Duran Duran, the bands that goes to that festival are like top of the top, rock bands. At the same day of Duran Duran, we had a fisherman that never went to Lisbon. So he was really happy with a smile like this, like the people that we integrate here, for example, with the dancing performance. So we have to dignify these people, the back office people on the gastronomy and other industries, because they are part of the process. And my advice is, we have to bring them to this stage, to your stage, and others, and we have to go to their stage. And this should be the normal daily life to add value to gastronomy and to the experience that we create with gastronomy.
Thank you, Nuno. Coming to Professor Ododo, what advice would you give tourism from your point of view?
We have to be deliberate in certain ways. Results will not just come for adventure. We should be very open to experimentation. Something happened on my dining table at lunch, and my friend was tapping me. Look at this, I said, just watch. Somebody said the Honorable Minister insisted that she must eat panadiam. So she brought a bowl of panadiam with beans and salad. So we are watching. Then we said, look, this does not go with what you have picked. I said, no. The Honorable Minister said, I must eat this pounded yam. I said, yes. But it comes with a particular soup. But she went ahead eating it that way. I said, oh, very nice. Very nice. So it is nice because you have not done the proper thing. So we went and fed her some okra soup and vegetable. She also tasted that, oh, extremely good. That experiment of beans and pounded yam is actually not a lot of place, because we also do eat yam and beans. So the taste you get from yam and beans will also come from pounded yam and beans. So that, by the way, until we take some deliberate steps and see what works better, what gives us that leverage and returns we want. Because the key drivers of tourism is people and the creativity available. along the line, as we derive pressure, we also want to create wealth. This is the ultimate. So you have to have a plan to make this happen. And I think that's the way to go.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moody, an advice from WIPO to the ministries of tourism, which often don't have a direct contact, obviously, with intellectual property issues and businesses in tourism.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I think it's just to reinforce what has already been said. To be honest, I think that we need to be looking at, and the Ministry of Tourism will be looking at how can we allow businesses to understand the value of IP. Now, it's not that you can't make money without IP, but you can go even further with intellectual property. And I think this is what the messaging really has been. And I think one of the things we've been trying to do, like Prof just mentioned, you need to have a plan. We've been working on a national policy around intellectual property to be able to get intellectual property even to students who are still in secondary schools, just to already start understanding what intellectual property is. It doesn't mean they're experts, but it means when they see it, they can recognize it. And that also goes, it's a culture shift. So at the universities, people start understanding and appreciating what intellectual property is. So there's a national strategy, a national direction around incorporating intellectual property into the culture and the way of life. Now that doesn't just affect the more seen, whether it's content creators, but it also goes into these local traditions that are not always visible in the forefront. So you think about, we were talking yesterday, you think about local women in Abeokuta, for example, who've made adire for many years. And people hear about adire, they see it. Netflix has portrayed it in a movie, and people say, look, we love that attire. Where can we get it? They want to go to Abeokuta, right? Now, those people there should know that what they're making can actually be generating so much money for their community. So that's how the country also begins to identify things we call geographical indications, that you're able to link the product to places in the country, whether it's Nsukka pepper, or it's Ogbomoso mangoes, or it's Ijebu gari. People want to have a taste of what's that special about this Ijebu gari. They say it's sour, but we want to go there and see it. It opens doors for tourism. So I think that national consciousness around intellectual property is very important. Another thing I would mention is that we need to have laws. And I think I said it at the beginning, but the laws need to inspire confidence in content creators and people who spend their energy and time making products. Not just the content creators themselves, but investors. So I know that Netflix works, for example, and I'm picking on them because she's here and she's been speaking very well about the great work they're doing. But a lot of the work that they would do in terms of partnering, it also comes with an assurance that there is, in this investment we make, we can also see that there is a framework that allows us to make these investments, that people will be rewarded. As a business, they're not running out of business. Now, that's how we also ensure that there is a playing field that is attractive to investors, but also that content creators are able to generate revenue. I think the final thing I want to mention is that because a lot of people involved in this space are small businesses, we need to be thinking a lot about how do we improve the quality or the accessibility to intellectual property services. And so that's something that Singapore did very well. They were able to create a pool of IP support so that by training young people out of school, it created a whole new industry of whether it's advisors, IP advisors, who can work with small businesses. Because right now you ask a small business owner, have you registered your intellectual property? And the first thing they say, look, I'm still just trying to make my money. I'm not going to start struggling to pay so much money to a law firm or to a lawyer. And there's that disconnect. we need to be able to have a pool of accessible services. And so those are just some thoughts that, that I have on that.
Thank you. I think that's a very last important point. How can government actually create those help desks, for small businesses to come and actually solve issues like, can you help me prepare my intellectual property protection in a way that I don't need to go through a very expensive law firm, and also that it's not frightening, because I think probably when you spoke to a lot of small businesses and you tell them, oh, you need to go through, and they're like, oh my God, that's going to take for ages and it's going to cost me a lot of money. So it's also, as you say, educate that this needs to be part of the process. We've actually at UNWTO worked with WIPO, and we have a series of case studies related to tourism where actually you wouldn't even imagine that, oh, IP rights, why? And I think this is something that wouldn't not come to the mind of 90% of the people or the SMEs working in tourism. Probably in the creative area and entertainment, people are more aware of, obviously, intellectual property protection. But in tourism, I think we're still very behind, and we don't value the communities, as you were saying, and that's a very, I would say, from a tourism perspective, if you put a name, then there's a territory and there's a place to visit. So that's definitely one of the most important points. And I wanted to come back to Shola, because we were talking about in the beginning that the locations where movies or series are developed obviously are an attraction factor. But if I'm a destination, how can I become competitive in this world? Because apart from obviously fiscal incentives that we know it's obviously important, but what is key for, because you produce a lot of your own content, to go to one location or another?
I can answer you in one word. It's authenticity. And people around the world want to see the authentic depiction of other people's cultures, localities, peoples, cuisines, fashion, art, history, whatever it is. And on Netflix, we found that our most successful titles are those that are most authentically told. If it's not authentic and it's not being sort of endorsed by the local community, the likelihood of it traveling and succeeding reduces significantly. So lean into the authenticity. People don't want another American story out of Nollywood. People want that Naija story so that they can connect with Naija people and Naija food and Naija culture and all the great aspects of Nigeria. So leaning into authenticity and telling our stories in the ways that are real. You don't have to fancify. It's a world of billions of people. 220 million people on our service. They want to see their everyday lives reflected on the screen. That's what they connect with. When it's not real, it doesn't sell.
Perfect. So the only thing you need to do is show who you are really. Find yourself. Nuno, yes, please go ahead.
Just to make another recommendation, because yesterday on my workshop I didn't have the chance to share 2 videos of my presentation, but I want to recommend to illustrate my work, and I will recommend the Chef's Table that is in Netflix. So I already have the Netflix subscription. I'm not I'm not trying to get one, but Chef's Table, it's the thing that I work, of course, and the thing that you are telling, that is real life. And real life of people, of culture, of restaurants, of chefs, or whatever. So this is a good recommendation for you. There are more, of course, Netflix and other ways. But Chef's Table, I recommend you to see each chef from many places in the world. And this is all about food culture experiences and authenticity and real life, because life is to be lived by real. So it's a good recommendation, I assure you.
Thank you, Nuno. So be real, be authentic, and then you will attract attention to it as you said. I need to wrap up because we're running out of time, but I wanted to finish by asking, because we are talking about creativity, to be creative here, and give me one word about what is Nigeria. And I will start with the Nigeria side. Professor Ododo, in one word, what is Nigeria?
In one word, Nigeria, land of opportunities.
Great. Shola?
Electric energy.
Electric energy, wow. We have a campaign here. Mr. Moody?
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah. Mr. Asika?
I think what makes Nigerians unique is their DNA. And in that DNA, we express it every day with our creative abilities. And yeah, it will keep on happening.
One word, Nigerians. That's clear. DNA. So in one word, the best thing in Nigeria are Nigerians. Nuno, now the outside perspective.
No, I have to say more than one word because I'm here only for 2 days. But I have one word, is challenging.
Perfect. I'll give you mine after listening to the Vice Prime Minister singing. Cool. I think this is a cool country. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you to our moderator.
Professor Ododo.
Presentation to the Prime Minister. The presentation
Okay.
to you.
All right, our panel, can you stand for a group picture? The photographers are hungry. It's like there's a photo taking competition. This panel is very happy. It's a good time to have a panel after lunch.